All right, folks, and welcome back to the Can You Really Think and Grow Rich tour. And of course, Adora, up next, we have the gentleman that I personally have been so excited to spend some time with. And we're so blessed and fortunate as we look at some of the folks that we've been able to have, not just on this tour, but on our previous programs and workshops, really the living legends of leadership, of personal development, of really uplifting humanity. When we think about some of the folks, Adora, that we've had the opportunity to spend some time with, the Bob Proctors of the world, the late Bob Proctor, who you and I didn't know, Adora, that last event was going to be one of his final public appearances. The Brian Tracy's of the world, the Jack Canfields of the world, who is, of course, up next with us, one of the greatest authors of all time, in my opinion, and also factually one of the greatest selling authors in the history of humanity. So he's right up there with some of the, big folks in history, Adora. Before we bring him on to discuss success principles, think and grow rich, and just generally how you can improve your life and improve your business in the time that we have with them, how excited are you, Adora, to spend some time with Jack?
Oh my goodness. This is another one of those pinch me moments. I feel like I was raised by these different authors. I was listening, taking in. I remember Jack's check on the wall, that he used to manifest his next round of reality, and thinking, if that guy says I can do it, I can do it, And yeah, it's just such a privilege and pleasure to get to have authentic conversations with people who have put out such great material that elevates our world, but that has been personally impactful and lives in my cells, in my life, in what I've created and will continue to create. So I'm so excited.
I'm excited too, and I know the folks watching are sick and tired of seeing you and I. So we're gonna bring Jack in. No. It's quite possible. Jack, welcome, of course, to the Can You Really Think and Grow Rich tour right here on the Los Angeles Tribune. First of all, hello, and how are you doing today, Jack?
I'm fine. I live in Santa Barbara. It's a sunny day. I got a good night's sleep. I'm happy to be here with you guys. So all is good.
Well, we're happy to have you, Jack. And one thing that you have been so passionate about is teaching folks the power of responsibility. I want to just kick it off by starting with the subject matter of responsibility, Jack, because we live in a world today where I think people really need to get what responsibility is. A lot of people may understand what that word means, or a lot of people may think that they're behaving in a fashion that is responsible, but they're not practicing absolute responsibility. They're not practicing 100% responsibility. What is this distinction, Jack, between folks that are just, generally they may think that they're responsible, but they're not truly taking full responsibility for their lives? Because I think that adds so much take-home value for the folks watching this right now. And I think your message is so important for the world today at large. So that's how we want to kick off this conversation with you, Jack, today.
Sure. Well, most people don't want more responsibility. It's like, it seems like a burden, but responsibility is what really frees you up. And I like to define responsibility as the ability to respond, the response ability. And basically what happens is that your ability to respond to reality is what creates your future reality. So everything you're currently experiencing is a result of how you responded intellectually, with thoughts, with the images, which are just thoughts and pictures, and with your actions or non-action, and your emotions, which are created mostly by your thoughts anyway. And so basically you get to think of your outer world as the screen on your computer. The hard drive is in your head. And basically, but we can't see what's in the hard drive until it's projected on the screen. And so everything we're currently experiencing is a result of how we responded to an earlier event. So if you want to change your future, which most people that are interested in success do, they want to be healthier, happier, wealthier, more impactful, whatever, you have to begin changing how you respond. And what happens is that 2 plus 2 will always equal 4. The world's doing 2, you're doing 2. And if you want 5, 6, or 7, which means more money, more health, more friends, more fun, whatever, you have to do something different. You have to have a different response, And so my whole life has been studying the responses of successful people, millionaires, billionaires, celebrity actors, Olympic medalists, etc. Now, you talk about 100% responsibility. Most people don't do that. Like if you're in a relationship, we say, well, my wife's 50% responsible and I'm 50% responsible. But when anything ever goes wrong, guess whose 50% it is? It's always the other person. So what we want to do is take 100% responsibility for every aspect of our life. And I have a chapter in my book, The Success Principle, says 99%'s a bitch, 100%'s a breeze. What does that mean? It means that if I am 99% committed to getting up and running every day, what happens is every day I have to decide, am I going to do it? Because there's that 1%. Is it raining? Is it too cold out? Did I drink too much last night? Did I not get enough sleep? I'm tired, whatever. And so you're always having to redecide every day. If you're 100% committed to anything, you don't talk about it. You just get up and do it. It actually makes life easier. You save a lot of time, if you will. Now, 100% responsibility means that I'm going to say that anything that I'm experiencing in my life, the amount of money I have, the amount of friends I have, the amount of opportunities I have, how pain-free my body is, how long I live, etc., is my responsibility. I'm going to ask the question is, how did I create that? How did I allow that? Or how did I promote that? So, we don't create everything. Sometimes we allow things. I remember when the women's movement was big, I used to use this example. If someone calls you a girl all the time and you want to be called a woman, but you never say anything, then you're allowing that to continue. Women who are abused sometimes will be abused when their husband's drinking, and yet they'll be the one at the grocery store who brings home the fifth of vodka or the alcohol, and they wonder why this keeps happening. Or they don't leave, or they don't go to couples counseling, or they don't call, child protective services, whatever they need to do, and they just keep allowing it to happen. And so basically we have to take responsibility. So again, anything I'm experiencing that I'm not happy about, I have to say, well, how am I creating this? Well, I have beliefs that tell me, I can't do it because I'm too old, or I'm too young, or I don't have enough friends. I don't have enough people in my community to get involved in a network marketing company, whatever it might be. And then what actions am I doing or not doing? And as I said, what I loved about Napoleon Hill and W. Clement Stone, who wrote a book with him, who is my mentor, and all the Bob Proctors and Brian Tracy's and Tony Robbins of the world, is we all study successful people. We interview them, we read their books and their autobiographies and so all of that, and look at what are the behaviors of these people. 2 years ago, I wrote 2 forwards to books. One was called Homeless to Billionaire, and it was by a guy, Andres Pira, who lives in Bangkok and also in Phuket in Thailand. And he was homeless at the age of 19, living on the beach, literally sleeping on a beach towel at night. And then now he's 35 and he's a triple billionaire. And how did he go in 15 years from nothing in a foreign country, because he grew up in Sweden, to being a triple billionaire? Well, he wrote 17 principles he lived his life by. And then my other friend wrote a book, Raphael Badziag wrote a book where he interviewed 21 billionaires. It took him 3 years just to get access to them, and 21 different industries, 17 different countries. And what we found with all these people is they all got up between 4:30 and 5:30 in the morning. They all meditated, they all exercised, and they all read every day for at least an hour. And so if you look at that and you say, okay, am I doing that? Am I doing the things that these successful people are doing? And if I'm not, as Tony Robbins likes to say, success leaves clues in books, in TED Talks, in YouTube videos, in seminars, interviews like this, podcasts, etc. Now, I'll just tell 2 more things about responsibility I think are important that I write about in my book, The Success Principles. E plus R equals O. Event plus response equals outcome. So think of this as the formula that can change your life. E plus R equals O. And when people don't get the outcome they want, mostly in the world, the O, they blame the E. Oh, it's the economy, it's the president, it's Biden, it's Trump, it's the Congress, they don't do anything, it's the political divide, it's the pandemic, it's Wall Street, it's the traffic that made me late. you ever notice how the same people are always late because of the traffic? Instead of saying, oh, I'm not leaving early enough. It's really funny how that works. And so we have this opportunity to change our R's. And, you can look at the power of thoughts. For example, let's say your spouse forgets your birthday. Well, that's an event. And most people end up feeling bad about that, because the R they tell themselves is, my husband doesn't love me. If he loved me, he'd remember my birthday. Well, the reality is it could be someone who loves me forgot my birthday. It's a different response in terms of your head. And so your beliefs and your thoughts, that would create a different outcome. Now I'm concerned about my husband, but I'm not feeling bad that he doesn't love me. So literally, I sat down with W. Clement Stone when I was in my early 20s, when he became my mentor. I worked for his foundation. And he said, he had 3 intake questions on our orientation. He said, but the one I want to talk about, he said, do you take 100% responsibility for your life? And I said, I think so. He said, son, this is a yes or no answer. I said, okay, I'm not even sure I know what 100% responsibility means. He said, have you ever blamed anybody for anything? I said, yeah. Have you ever complained about anything? I said, yeah. Do you ever make excuses for why you don't get things done and accomplished? I said, yeah. He said, you don't take 100% responsibility. You have to give up all blaming, all complaining, and all excuse making. And I saw a meme on the internet the other day. It said, you can either make $1 million or 1 million excuses, but you can't do both. And so a lot of us, all these reasons why we can't do things, and they're rationales that keep us stuck. And I would just say, that one of the things that stops us is we have behaviors that we don't realize are limiting us, and we have limiting beliefs. And the thing I've learned teaching the law of attraction, since The Secret came out many years ago, is people always say, well, why aren't I achieving this? I'm visualizing, I have goals that are measurable, I'm doing affirmations, and they have unconscious limiting beliefs, which are usually formed between the age of 3 and 8 years old. One of mine was money creates problems. Money doesn't grow on trees. Rich people get richer, poor people get poor. This is my dad. Rich people are people that screwed other people over, because he was kind of a union guy. And so I didn't want to be the bad guy. I didn't want to be corrupted. Money's not spiritual. All these things were part of the zeitgeist, the culture that I grew up in. And so I had to, and I wasn't even aware I had those. And yet I began to do work on my subconscious mind, and there's techniques for bringing up out of your subconscious. Now you're aware of it. Now you can replace it with something new. And until we do that, we don't know why we don't pick up the phone. We don't know why we don't make that investment. I mean, literally, I could have invested in Bitcoin when it was $3 a coin, and I didn't do it. And it was a belief I had about, the currency, which won't go deeply into, but I'd be very, very wealthy now. I'm wealthy as it is, but I would be much more wealthy had I done that. And so, there's things like, well, I don't know much about that. Well, you can learn, there's all these things that people have that are stopping them. And then finally, limiting behaviors. We have a lot of self-destructive habits that we usually defend, like drinking too much, not getting enough sleep. We ignore feedback. We fail to continuously educate ourselves and learn new skills. We waste time watching TV, scrolling through the internet, not exercising, spending more money than we make, on and on it goes. Teddy Roosevelt said, if you could kick the person in the pants responsible for most of your trouble, you wouldn't sit for a month.
So was that phrase that you said 99% is a bitch and 100% is a breeze?
Yes.
Yeah. And so what that means, I want to make sure I've got this, because it felt really huge, but you loaded that last bit with so many nuggets that I need to make sure I got it. So when you're only 99% committed, you battle that 1% every day, whether it's the rain, do I feel like it? So that's why it's a bitch. You're miserable. But when you're just 100% in, there is no question there. The rain doesn't matter. So there's peace and power in it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. And imagine if you had 100% commitment to every time you were upset by anything, you realize that upset is because you have a belief that something should be different than it is. So my wife criticizes me when the traffic's too much, when one of my employees is late getting a report into me or whatever. And so normally we just get upset and think we have a reason because they didn't do what they're supposed to do. But the reality is, I love it. Byron Katie says, reality always wins. And so
the work. I
basically,
love her.
yeah, if we just accept things the way they are, and it doesn't mean we don't work to change them, things like racism and sexism and, people destroying the environment and so forth, but that we don't do it from a place of I'm upset. We do it from a place of I care. And it's really, really, really different. And so what happens is most people feel justified in their anger. Like, look at the war in Ukraine. Every day there's images on TV to get upset about, but it is what it is. I can send money to refugees, which I've done, and things like that, but I can't stop Putin from doing what he's doing. Nobody seems to be able to do that at the moment. And so to spend my day upset about it. I remember I had a woman in a training who was upset that her father had left her sister twice as much money in the will. And she was really upset about it. And I said, when did that happen? She said, oh, that happened about 12 years ago. And I said, wow, really? And how often do you think about it? She said, every day. And I said, and how many hours a day? Maybe, oh, at least an hour. I get really upset, And I said, well, geez, who's upsetting you? Your dad made one action. He did what he did. Your sister's not giving you that money. She did what she did. And you're upsetting yourself. You're responsible for feeling miserable. I always tell parents, if your kid's late coming home and at 2 a.m, you say, you drove me crazy. I was out of my mind for 3 hours. No, your kid didn't drive you crazy. You drove yourself crazy, imagining bad things happening to them. They're wrapped around a tree in a car accident. They're wrapped around Billy naked in the back seat, whatever. But the point is, you're the one creating those images. You're the one that made it up, not their behavior. Your reaction to their behavior. And once you get that, if you have 100% commitment to always look for what that is, then you can create inner peace. And that's what I think everybody should go
Incredible.
For.
Thank you for that, Jack. And folks, this is, of course, the Can You Really Think and Grow Rich tour. We are live here with one of the greatest authors of all time, Jack Canfield. And, you mentioned W. Clement Stone. And, Jack, I always tell folks that are fans of Think and Grow Rich to read W. Clement Stone's book and then read Think and Grow Rich side by side. Yes. About 80-90% of the book, in my view, is very similar, but there are some differences that I think are important for folks to learn from W. Clement Stone. The main difference, of course, is in the titles of the book, right? W. Clement Stone's system, I think, is very important. But we want to, of course, also touch base on a real powerful quote of Napoleon Hill. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And we're also asking some of the other speakers to touch on this quote. And that's, of course, if you can conceive it and believe it, you can achieve it. Now, this, of course, is something that I think a lot of people have a tough time wrapping their minds around, even though it's such a simple quote. So what I did want to ask you, if you wanted to make a comment on the W. Clement Stone a book as well, and just possibly the difference there, and also the power of that quote, the power of belief, why people need to embrace the power of belief in their lives. We'd love to hear your thoughts, Jack.
I would, I don't remember the exact differences between the two books, but two things I learned from Stone. One was he just said, do it now. He used to give out these round wooden coins. I have one on my desk behind me, and on it says TUIT, to it. And I said, what is that? He said, well, people always say, I'll do it when I get around to it. And so we said, now you have a round to it. And so we used to carry that in our pockets and always remember, do it now. And the other thing he taught us is to tell people what you want to do, and they'll probably help you do it. So, that was critical to me, is like, I used to put my goals on my website. I wrote a list of 101 goals I have that I want to achieve in my book, the Dare to Win. One of them was I wanted to meet Kenny Rogers, the singer. Kenny Rogers read that book and called me up and said, come to Vegas and be my guest at my next show. I got to go backstage with him. We talked. I said, why did you want to meet me? He said, well, you're a great writer. I want to write a book. And I'd always wanted to be a singer, so we got along famously. But the idea is, tell people what you want to do. Don't hold your goals, inside privately, but let people know what they are. They'll probably come and help you. Anyway, to talk about the idea of, if you can conceive it and believe it and achieve it, if you can conceive it and believe it, you can achieve it. So here's the deal. In Napoleon Hill's books, he always said the first thing you have to do is decide what you want. You have to have a burning desire. You have to have a purpose that consumes you, in a sense. You have to decide what that is. And so for me, I think that's very important, that you come up with what you want. And, we have all these people that talked about, the idea that, follow your bliss, joy is your guidance system, all these kind of things. And so figure out what you want to do and believe it's possible. If anyone ever did it, you can do it. That's why I recommend, and W. Clement Stone recommended to me, read, biographies, read autobiographies, etc. And you'll see that other people can do it. And then today with the internet, we see all kinds of people achieving amazing things. And if they have that possibility, we can do it as well. So that's the first thing. And then Stone taught me to be what he called an inverse paranoid. An inverse paranoid is someone who believes the world is plotting to do you good. So, yeah, because paranoids are people who think that the world's out to get them. Yeah. And I heard a joke about 2 weeks ago. What is a paranoid with low self-esteem? Someone who thinks nobody important is out to get them.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So anyway, but belief is so critical. Our beliefs and our values are the two things that really drive our behavior. And so if you believe you're worthy of love, you're worthy of success, you're worthy of happiness, you're attractive, you're capable. Most of us, our beliefs about those things are formed by the age of 8 years old, 5th grade at the latest. We think we're attractive, we're athletic, we can do math, we can sing, we can dance, we can't. So, but those are all just choices. We made them up. And so we can choose to believe anything. Remember when I first learned that and believed it, I got paralyzed. I kept thinking, what if I choose the wrong thing? Because I can make up anything and I can achieve it. And then I realized there is no wrong thing. You learn from whatever you choose and you get feedback and you move on. But I think we have to spend time intentionally choosing beliefs that will help us reach our goals. People say, what beliefs should I have? Well, the ones that will support you in getting to where you want to go. And most of our beliefs have been inculcated on us. We're conditioned, from our family, from our church, from our teachers, our coaches, the school we grew up in, the neighborhood, if you're Italian, Irish, whatever, we all have different beliefs based on that. And as I said earlier, most of our beliefs are below the threshold of awareness. So we have to work on that. I had a guy in a seminar not long ago who he was a natural salesperson and he wasn't making as much money as he should. It was clear. So we did this belief exercise where you go back in time to the earliest time you can feel this feeling that you get when you think about not being able to sell more. And he went back to when he just graduated college. He was about 21 and he got a job with the same company his father had a job. He was selling insurance. And his first month, his check was bigger than his father's. Because he's just a natural salesperson. He brought his check home, showed it to his dad. His dad said, he didn't say a word, actually. He just looked at it, frowned, and walked away. And later he asked his mother, he said, I thought Dad would be proud of me. She said, you made more money than he did. He's been there for 10 years. That was your first month. He really felt kind of depressed. And so Scott decided, I'm never going to make more money than my father because I don't want to humiliate him. So here he was now, 45 years old, 24 years later, and he was still being run by that belief, but unconsciously. When we found it and replaced it with a new belief, he went out and made half of his year's salary in like a week. And he went on to I think he 5 times his salary that year. But it's that powerful. You have to believe. But again, just choose to believe that it's possible that I can make $1 million, whatever. I have a famous quote from Muhammad Ali where he says, impossible is a big word thrown around by small people who find it easier to live in a world they've been given than to explore the power they have to change it. Impossible is not a fact, it's an opinion.
It's an opinion. I want to just, because you are obviously, look at the books around you, and we learned you have over 3,000 books. You've written books. You've done so much. You are just a well of powerful information. There are 2 things that you brought up that I think are really worth, there are many things, but one is there's a whole group of people that say, don't share your goals with people because they might be naysayers. Your brain may hit a pleasure center and think that you've already done it. And so I'd love for you to expand a little bit on why it is, how it's benefited you to share people and how you do that without, thinking that you've already done it and then selling out and never doing it. And then the second thing, well, we could start there. Let's start there and then I'll come back.
Well, first of all, I think, activating the pleasure center is a good thing. I don't
Okay.
think it makes you think it makes you think you've already accomplished, but that's good. It builds your self-concept. If you knew you had skied down a Black Diamond Mountain 25 times without getting hurt, you'd feel confident skiing down a Black Diamond run on a mountain. And if you felt
Very good.
confident that you've given a talk 25 times and people gave you a standing ovation, you wouldn't feel nervous going to give a talk because you've already done it 25 times and survived. So that's why I think visualization and affirmation is a good thing to do. That's my point of view. And I know there are other people, I've read their studies and so forth, but I don't agree with them. And I have
Okay.
like thousands of students that would verify what I'm telling you, that have become millionaires and so forth. The second thing is that when you tell people, there are going to be people that are naysayers. And so what? You know, when it rains, you just put on an umbrella and you go to where you need to go. You know, when I decided to start a foundation, my wife said, "We're not rich. You can't start a foundation. You're not Henry Ford." I said, "We have $19,000 left over from this conference I just put on. I want that money as seed money for next year. Only works if we're a nonprofit." And I started the foundation. And that foundation, we eventually developed a program called the Goals Program for people on welfare. We've gotten 800,000 people in California off welfare based on that. And so I said, whenever everyone says, no, you can't do it, or you shouldn't do it, or you're a fool, you're being con, whatever, say thank you for your contribution and you move on. You know, so what? You know, if there's a can in the road when you're on a bicycle, you just steer around it. You don't let it stop you and say, oh, I should never have done that. So just know. One of my friends, Martin Root, is a teacher of this work, says, you know, I can guarantee you what anyone's reaction is going to be when you tell them your goals. And I went, you can? What is it? He said, their reaction will be whatever it is. That's
Yeah.
it, right?
That's so good. I love it. I love it. I'm on board with that. I always end up sharing my goals. But the other part that I want to bring attention to that you brought up that is so powerful is sometimes in this positivity, optimism, only think about the positive side of it. I remember in my early 20s being scared to think about my limiting beliefs or my childhood, feeling that it might spin me into creating more negative things. But what we're realizing, even Gabby Bernstein's latest book, after all these manifesting books, she's going, you know what? I had to heal the trauma because my trauma was coming up while I was doing these miracle, workshops and things. So
Right.
yeah, so what you've been teaching for so long is such an important part, but for a newbie, you're trying these different techniques and taking them so literal. And so can you speak a little bit more about how that actually, I mean, you already shared an amazing story of how it moved the needle, but how to do it in a way where they don't
Well, I think the thing you have to know is, I love what Esther Hicks says in Abraham Hicks' work. Said you can't put a smiley face on top of your gas gauge in your car. That's basically saying your gauge is empty. You're still not going to have gas in your gas tank. So one has to confront. There are trauma in life. We all get that. There are obstacles in life. There are setbacks in life. Somebody invents something new that puts your whole technology out of work. People are laid off. The pandemic comes along. Your daughter gets sick. Your son dies in the war. Things like that happen. And then you've got to accept the fact that they happen, experience your feelings, and then look below to see if there's anything you need to release. And if someone just calls you an idiot and you get all upset, that's triggering something from the past. And so trauma occurs. My mother was an alcoholic. My dad was a violent alcoholic. I used to hide in the back of those big radios you see in old movies that come up this high, and there's like a little dial up here and the rest of it's cabinet. And when he would drink, I would go there and wait till he went to bed or I'd get beaten. And so I had trauma to deal with. I had to do a lot of therapy. Stuff comes up. And I say, go forward until something emerges you have to deal with. And also you can plan for obstacles. Dan Sullivan, good friend of mine who's a trainer, teaches something called strategy circles. So think about every obstacle that could occur and then think about 2 or 3 ways you can deal with that obstacle. When we had Chicken Soup for the Soul, we were selling, 13 million books one year. But we had to we had to create 13 million buying decisions. And so one of these marketing guys told us, if you can get people to belong to a book club and they get 13 books a year, 12 plus a bonus, now you've only got to generate 1 million buying decisions. And so that was really cool. But our publisher, who was publishing these books, didn't like to send out books one at a time. So that was an obstacle. He liked to put big pallets of books, send them to Costco and to Barnes & Noble. So we had to figure out, well, what's the way around that? Well, Who likes to send out books one at a time? Amazon. So we could do a contract with Amazon to fulfill the book club. Now we have a solution. So you've got to be aware there's going to be obstacles. There can be people who don't agree with it, people who rain on your parade, people that are actually competing with you, out to get you. It happens. And so what happens is we have to always visualize what's on the other side of that obstacle. That's the positive thinking part. I'm going to get there. This is going to work. I have the capacity. Harvard and Stanford did some research on attitude versus aptitude, and they found that 85 to 90% of all success is based on attitude, and only 8 to 15%, depending on which study you read, is based on aptitude. So we have to have that positive belief that's the conceive it, believe it, achieve it. But also you have to be realistic and then deal with the stuff that comes up. It's just that otherwise you become delusional for sure.
Incredible conversation. Okay. Thank you for that incredible conversation there. And folks, of course, you're tuning in to the Can You Really Think and Grow Rich tour. We're here alongside Jack Canfield. And Jack, you were not born immediately as one of the greatest authors of all time, and it's estimated that your work has sold over 500 million books. I mean, there was a time period where you were still on the journey building the career. And what we want to do is we want to, go in the time machine, go in that DeLorean, and go back to the point in time when you were still just deciding that, you know what, I want to be an author. You know what, I want to go ahead and take that leap, and I want to, I have something that I can share with the world. I have a spark within whatever it was that you were going through that inspired you, motivated you to take that leap. We want to go back. And so, because there's a lot of folks watching this right now that are in that moment in their life, in that phase in their life, where they're just realizing that they have a message they want to share with the world. They have a book that they want to write for the world. What are some of the attributes, qualities, characteristics that you had at that moment in time in your life that helped you along your journey to your success? Please, Jack.
Well, I think the first thing was I always wanted to make a difference. I grew up in I was born in 1944. So the 1960s and 70s was when I graduated high school. I was in college and then graduate school and so forth. And the civil rights movement was going on. I wanted to make a difference to that. Feminism started to occur with, books coming out, about that and all of that. So I just wanted to make a difference. And so I started teaching in an all-black inner city high school in Chicago. I was going to Jesse Jackson's church. I was just committed to contributing somehow. And I realized very quickly that my students didn't have high self-esteem. They didn't believe they could learn. So I became more interested in that than I became interested in teaching history, which is what I was teaching. And so I decided to write a book called 100 Ways to Enhance Self-Concept in the Classroom. And I started going out, finding every activity I could. And my goal was to write 2 a week. And if I could write 2 a week, I'd have 100 by the end of the year. So one of the attributes I call it is bum glue. A friend of mine who lives in Australia came up with it. The idea, you glue your bum to the chair and you write. And so the key thing is it's called words on paper. Words in your head they're not very valuable. Words spoken like this are valuable. Words written down are valuable. Words turned into, podcasts, all that kind of thing. So the other thing is I believed I could do it. This was about a year before I met W. Clement Stone, but I actually believed I could do it. So discipline, believe it's possible. We talked about before, believe it. I already conceived it and I achieved it by disciplined writing every day with a chicken soup for the soul. This was fascinating. I didn't know I was going to write a book about chickens, these stories, but I kept collecting stories of people who overcame obstacles, people who were more loving, people who, wanted to make a difference in the world, funny stories. And I used them in my talks. I was going around doing a lot of trainings and speeches. And so someone on the road said, are those stories in a book? And I said, no. And I was flying home from Boston to LA where I lived at the time. And I said, I'm going to write down every story I know. And I had about 69 or 70 of them. And so I said, I'm going to write 2 stories a week, one Monday through Wednesday, one Thursday through Saturday. And I'll let them sit for a couple of weeks. I learned that, let it percolate. And then you go back and you edit them. And so again, I produced a book in a year. And again, I would say the other thing is I asked, one of the big fears a lot of people have is a fear of rejection. And what I teach is if you ask somebody for something and they say no, your life did not get worse. So if I said to Adora, will you have dinner with me tonight? And she said, no, I didn't have a dinner with anyone to eat dinner with before I asked her. I don't have anyone to eat dinner with after I asked her. My life stayed the same. It's only if I go in and tell myself, oh, no one will ever love me. My mother was right. I chew with my mouth open. I leave my elbows on the table. I'm always going to be alone. I'll die alone in an old apartment somewhere. Then I'll feel bad. But ask. Mark Victor Hansen and I wrote a chapter in a book once called, the title was 17 Ask. And I coined a term a number of years ago, become an asshole. And what I mean by that is you have to ask a lot of people. Chicken Soup for the Soul was turned down by 144 publishers before I got a yes from Health Communications. And then, when we wanted to be on the bestseller list, I interviewed a bunch of people, including Scott Peck and John Gray and people like that who were Men from Mars. And they all said, do at least 3 interviews a day for a year, do 1 a day forever. And he was on the New York Times bestseller list for 12 years, 600 weeks. He was on the list. Why? He did 3 interviews a day and then 1 a day for 12 years. And so that willingness to do the work. And we didn't make a bestseller list till 14 months after the book came out. So I could have given up after 10 months and say, well, this isn't working. So persistence and consistency, I think, is really critical. And I would say, finally, follow your heart. What do you care about? And, and so meditate, trust your inner guidance, trust your intuition. I had to do that numerous times in my life. When I wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul and we're going to call it, I had a staff person in my company quit. He said, he was responsible for trying to get us speaking jobs in the corporate world. And he said, I can't go in there and get you a job if you wrote a book called Chicken Soup for the Soul. Can't you write The 8th Habit of a Highly Effective Person? I said, no, that's not what I'm going to do. And I've made literally well over $100 million off Chicken Soup for the Soul in terms of royalties. When we sold the company for, high 10, I'm not, the confidentiality, I'm not allowed to disclose it, but it was a lot of tens of millions of dollars. But the reality is you have to follow your heart, write about what you care about, get words on paper. We call it vomit copy. Just start, don't try to edit it to write it. Just get words on paper.
Incredible.
And the other thing you can do, by the way, is use technology. What I do often now is I will dictate a chapter into my computer, and then I'll have Rev or Otter or one of those transcription services transcribe it, and then all I have to do is edit it. So the idea is trust yourself. Don't think you have to compare yourself to Tony Robbins or me or anyone else. Know that there's going to be an audience for you. The people that are attracted to Tony are a little more gung-ho. People are attracted to me, a little more calm often. And people attracted to Gabriel Bernstein, maybe more feminine people than masculine. So you got to trust that your message is going to land with somebody, and trust the impulse, trust the desire. Don't believe you can't do it. Yeah.
Incredible. You mentioned John Gray, and he's actually also one of the speakers on this tour. So we're so excited as well to hear from him. And, something that I spoke yesterday, I had a meeting with my general counsel, and I was so excited about this time that I was able to share with you today. And I said, I'm going to have the opportunity to speak with Jack Canfield tomorrow. And the focus that you have on the preparation, and I had a conversation with him yesterday. I'm like, it's so interesting to me that out of all the numerous speakers and authors that we have spoken with, Jack is probably the one that, in my experience, is most focused on actually preparing and really respecting the time that we have together and wanting to do the best work possible, even at this incredible stage in his career. And I was really impressed by that. And I told my general counsel, and I said, I don't think it's an accident that he's sold over 500 million books, right? Because, we've spoken to so many incredible folks, and you really inspired me with how focused you were on preparing. So can you talk a little bit about that, Jack?
Well, yeah. I mean, just so your listeners or viewers know, I asked you what questions you were going to ask me, because I find if I get those questions and I meditate, go into a meditative state, and then think about notice what comes up as my answers. And I don't want to sit here and go, oh yeah, that guy I used to work with in Michigan, I want to be able to say Ray Johnson, and sometimes at my age, you struggle to find the right name or word. I'm 77. And so for me, I want to know what's going to be valuable for the listeners. What do I think is going to help them? So I want to. I always ask myself, and this may sound a little pejorative, but it doesn't mean to. When I'm writing my books or when I'm preparing for an interview, what would someone in Iowa who maybe didn't even graduate from college, how would I connect with them so that they get it? At the same time, knowing someone who might be a CEO of a company who graduated from the Wharton Business School wouldn't be, feel like it was under their level of interest as well. So I do prepare. And I thought about these questions and I made some notes, and absolutely.
I think that's incredibly inspiring, Adora, because you would think that after 500 million books, someone would, just kind of go with the flow a bit. But that was very inspiring.
Well, yeah. And I was going to say, Jack, you just grabbed my heart again. I had a question for you that parlays into this, because Dennis Waitley's a longtime friend and mentor.
Yeah.
We just did a tour with him, and he's very prepared, as Earl Nightingale being his. But hearing that you meditated on it, that's where you got my heart. And my question before I heard this, such a great question, Mo, was I was wondering, out of the personality types, I'm thinking of the one that they put in colors, but what your main natural states are, because I hear so much heart, the stories of contribution. I want to help these kids. Go into your heart, meditate. But I also hear the drive and the promotion, all that. So I just love to hear. I just love to know.
Well, I've had a number of different, from astrology to your handprint to people that are talk about the 4 types. Are you a natural salesperson or a researcher, and all these different things. And what's interesting about me is I'm balanced almost in all of those. So it's very fascinating. I came in with a purpose. This will sound a little woo-woo, but I was in a workshop when I was a high school teacher, and we were asked to decide, go back to when you decided to become a teacher. And everyone in the workshop went back to 5th grade, and they were inspired by this teacher, or there's some summer camp, they were a counselor and they decided they wanted to do it. I went back to before I was born. I had no idea I was going to go there. And there was a bunch of us who were like just spirits, not even incarnated yet, flying through space. And I looked down on Earth. It was 1944, World War II, atomic bombs going off. And I thought, oh my God, I have to go down there and help out. And I kind of got the message from all the other people. We were like I wrote a book called The Golden Motorcycle Gang, that's what I called this group of consciousnesses. We were like on spring break, we were all kind of irreverent and fun and conscious. And
how do Mo and I join? We want to join the Golden Motorcycle Gang.
I think you joined it by declaring it. You just did.
Done. I'm in. Yeah.
But what I noticed was that I chose to come down with a purpose, and they all were going like, you're codependent, you need to come, we're here on. Anyway, I came down with a purpose, which was to bring more peace, love, and joy to the world. And even starting in high school and in college, I was doing that. And that's just been, it keeps evolving, more and more. My next book's going to be about love and fear, which I think will be the most powerful book I ever wrote. But the point being that I think the essence of who we are is love, and what gets in the way is fear. And so I've removed most of the blocks to my essence. And so that love comes through, and meditation is a big part of that, to tuning into a higher power. This is interesting. Most people don't know this, but when I worked for W. Clement Stone, I worked in this office in Chicago. On the top floor was the guy who was the editor of the Success magazine, whose name's escaping me at the moment, but he wrote The Greatest Salesman book.
Augmentino.
Bandino, yeah. So Bandino was upstairs. So I used to go hang out with him at night because he was a workaholic and worked late. But there was a guy on the top floor, one floor above him actually, who we never knew what he did. And he was there. He'd come down and eat lunch in the cafeteria. And we never talked to him because he looked kind of, private. And I finally found out W. Clement Stone hired him and paid him a ridiculous amount of money. His only job was to sit upstairs, and when he met an obstacle, he would call this guy and say, come up with a solution. And this guy would go into a meditative state for an hour, 15 hours, whatever it was, and he would come up with some solution that saved Stone millions of dollars, that made him buy the right property instead of the wrong property. But he was like his psychic, I guess you'd say, and he was on staff. That was his only job. So you can tune in through meditation to a higher level of guidance than you get from your normal intellectual mind.
You know,
yeah.
I want to make a public declaration to all psychics. Send me your resume. I want to find one so I can hire them, have them on my payroll, because I did not know W. Clement Stone. You know, you think of him, I never had the opportunity to meet him, but he seems like a pretty stern guy. And the last thing I would have thought is that he had a psychic on payroll. So that was very interesting to me. And Jack, again, we want to thank you for contributing to humanity. You've really lived a life that speaks for itself. And in the we have about 10 or so minutes remaining together. I want to get your point of view and perspective on the future. Yeah. The future of both, Jack, the work that you have in front of you, and also the future of our species and the world at large, and what your point of view is for where we're going. I know it's kind of a loaded and vague question, but I'd just love to hear your general thoughts on that, please.
Well, I'll start with me and keep it brief. Basically, for me, I'm 77. I made a commitment to live to 105. I think it's possible given all the research that we have about, I take really good care of myself. And I think your belief about how long you're going to live is really important as well. We now have a training community. I've trained over 5,000 people to teach my work in 107 different countries around the world. My goal is to have 1 million people doing that in the 2030s. And that's one of the things we're working on as well. And then Chicken Soup for the Soul, we've sold 600 million copies so far. And so that I want to see that continue to grow. We had a goal to sell 1 billion copies, and I think we're well on track to do that. China produces about 50 million books a year they print over there, working on 4 new books about love and power. I mentioned Love and Fear, a book on the power of wow, and also a book on I call it the Abundance Experience Workbook. Politically, I think, we're in a situation where we're going to hit bottom before we hit top. Like in Alcohol Anonymous, you have to hit bottom, and then all of a sudden you go, I can't take this anymore, and you go up. So I think we're finding we're in a place in our country and in the world. So many dictators in the world right now. We see Putin and other people like that. A lot of autocrats in the world, but a lot of people really feeling this need for expansion and pushing up against that. I think that there's a growing level of compassion that's occurring. The internet's allowing us to know. The internet's like a nervous system for the whole world. When I grew up, we didn't know what was happening in China. We didn't know what was happening in Ukraine. None of us knew what was happening in South America or in South Africa. But now every day we can find out what's going on. So it's like you have a pain in your toe, you figure out what to do with it, So we're starting to go, okay, how do we create systems that work where we can have the wealth, the health, the happiness. We have the happiness index in the world now that didn't exist 25 years ago. Decentralization is starting to occur with cryptocurrencies and blockchain. I think that's a big deal. And scientific breakthroughs. I'm invested in a company right now that is figuring out how to move hydrogen in these big hydrogen blimps, because hydrogen is really the solution to just a ton of problems. The fossil fuels, the whole reason Putin gets away with what he does right now is that we have Germany is dependent. They're sending over $1 billion a day for the natural gas they get. Well, if they had hydrogen, which has no pollution that it creates, and they wouldn't be dependent on, and hydrogen can be created out of anything. I mean, it's the most, how to say this, it's the most abundant molecule in the universe. And so it's available everywhere. And when we know how to break it into energy, which is easy to do, we can drive cars with it. We can drive trains with it. We can take I just learned this yesterday. Bigger pollution than the airplanes in the air, which is hugely polluting, are the ships going across the ocean, carrying all these things from China and other countries. And now they're creating these solar powered ships where they have this big array of panels on top of these cargo ships. So that's happening. More people are meditating than ever. We're having major medical breakthroughs, natural medicine, organic food, all these things. Even though the pharmaceutical companies are kind of controlling everybody right now through, I think the vaccines are part of that and so forth, we're starting to have more awareness because of the internet. The internet has a lot of problems. As we know, social media tells you what you're supposed to believe. And then if you're on the right, you get more of Fox News and those kind of things. If you're on the left, you get more of MSNBC and CNN. It's pretty soon the problem, but I think people are starting to wake up to that. Natural healing's occurring. More entrepreneurs are coming through with great breakthroughs and just the entrepreneurial power of that. So I'm optimistic. I really am optimistic. I think, can't remember the guy's name right now, but he wrote a book saying we actually have less wars than we've ever had. We have more breakthroughs happening, scientific breakthroughs happening. Whoever thought we would talk about colonizing Mars, Elon Musk and so on and so forth. So I'm always optimistic, but I see the signs and they're there. So I think
well,
we're doing
1944, you knew you were going to come in and help elevate humanity. So it makes sense that you were optimistic then. You've come and lived your purpose, still expanding that. So it's just so divine. Talk
It really
about
is
100%
divine.
responsibility. Yeah.
And Adora, Jack said something there that was really fascinating to me. And that was talking about some of the things with regard to various different industries, pharmaceutical industries, etc., as well as mentioning things in the media. The Los Angeles Tribune, Jack, is the only national brand that promotes having not just an open forum for discussion, but we're actually the only national brand that embraces the self-help industry and treats folks in the self-help industry in a fashion and in a way that we believe that they not only they deserve, but that no other national brand does. Most national brands historically have been very critical of teachers, authors, speakers from that world, except for the Los Angeles Tribune with our leadership and our commitment. I want to ask you to speak now on that mission and the importance of that mission and what you believe the importance of that is for not just the self-help industry, but the media world at large.
Well, I think, unfortunately for a lot of media, that the old, if it bleeds, it leads. If it upsets you, you're more likely to stay engaged. You get longer engagement on social media and so forth. But I love what you guys are doing. And I think it's important that there are voices, first, that are balanced, first, that are talking about the importance of growth. We all need to grow in consciousness. My goal ultimately would be to see all this stuff taught in schools. That there's a class called life skills or self-science or whatever you might want to call it, values education, how to be successful. No one learns that. No one gets divorced because they didn't memorize the 5 causes of the Civil War. It's because they don't know how to communicate or how to choose people or resolve conflicts, etc. So I love what you guys are doing. I think it's important that we make this work, which is the raising of consciousness, the raising of compassion, the raising of the communication that needs to happen, where everybody can listen to each other, whether it's in a relationship or between companies or countries, as we see right now. So kudos to you and what you're doing, because if people aren't aware of something, they can't take advantage of it. And so you're helping people be aware of the opportunities and the resources that are available to them. And if I can be self-serving for a minute, I just want to say, if people are more interested in my work, you can go to jackcanfield.com. Very simple. My name, you see it on the screen there, jackcanfield.com. And you can find out about our books. We do seminars. And we talked about beliefs. And what I do twice a year, I do a free call. We usually have about 2,000 people on it, where I take you through a 30-minute belief change process where we identify one of your limiting beliefs and you release it, and you never run you ever again. And so if you'd like to be part of that, you can go there. But thank you, Mo and Adora, for all that you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, Jack, for showing up as the leader that you are, not just today, but throughout your illustrious career. You truly are, in my view, a pioneer and just an incredible human being all around for us to learn a lot from, not just from your work, but also from the way you go about your work. And so I wanted to just personally thank you yet again. And Adora, what are your, do you have a final quick question, Adora, or anything else you want to comment very briefly on this lovely time that we had with Jack, Adora?
No, just that. Thank you so much for your time and for allowing us to experience the authenticity of who you are. The work is one thing, but getting to have this conversation really allows people to feel who you are and what you're about. And I think it would be really great for us to have you on again, to look at the things that you've got going on in the world, to see how we can help put a microphone or megaphone on that, because you're the golden motorcycle gang, and we want to pay our dues.
Awesome. All righty, folks. This is the Can You Really Think and Grow Rich tour. You just heard an incredible, powerful conversation with Jack Canfield. So stay tuned while we go into our next segment coming up very quickly. Thank you very much.